Welcome to Sleepy History, where you might yawn from the vibe, but your jaw's gonna drop from the filthy truths of the Middle Ages. Think history's just kings and wars. Nah, today we're diving under the sheets. Literally. Get ready to uncover the world's first red light districts, where brothels sat right next to churches, so priests could repent horizontally. Where sex workers were worshipped like goddesses, sort of, and birth control came in the form of beeswax, horse pee, and snakes. Yes, there. This episode will make you laugh, cringe, and maybe cry a little, because, if we're honest, history was always ruled by the lower brain. But before we start, be honest. What time is it where you are? Still listening to horny medieval nonsense at 2 a.m.? Drop the time in the comments. We're watching. Let's begin. The more you ban it, the louder it moans. In medieval Europe, two things were inevitable: the plague and erections. Welcome to the Middle Ages, a time when people feared sin, worshipped saints, and masturbated in the dark, while whispering, "Forgive me, Lord." Let's not romanticize it. Life was disgusting. You shared your bathwater with rats, your bed with fleas, and your underwear with, well, nothing, because most people didn't wear any. Yet, despite all the dirt, disease, and demons, there was one thing no one could scrub out of their system: desire. People were horny, all the time. But here's the rub. The church said no, not a chill, understanding no. More like, if you so much as think about your genitals, we'll summon a demon to chew them off. Actual, historical belief. In 14th century France, a teenage boy told his priest that at night he felt a woman's hand stroking him. The priest didn't blink. He said, "Ah, that must be the devil's girlfriend." So they exorcised the boy, then buried him alive. Why? To stop him from passing on the handjob curse. That's not a dirty joke. That's real history. No sex, please. We're extremely Catholic. The church had a rule book thicker than a Viking's thigh. If sex wasn't boring, sad, and baby-related, it was a sin. Sex on Sundays. Sin. Sex for pleasure, sin. Sex in a fun position, sin. Sex while smiling, sin. Sex while enjoying being alive. Send them to the stake. The only holy sex was 1, in marriage; 2, for reproduction; 3, while crying, apologizing, and avoiding eye contact. But even the Pope can't stop puberty. The real problem: testicles don't follow theology. Men in the Middle Ages didn't have therapy. They didn't have dating apps. They had wet dreams, goat stew, and a whole lot of guilt. They tried everything to kill the urge: ice baths, whipping themselves with branches, drinking anti-lust potions made from vinegar and crushed beetles, yum. And when all else failed, they went to church-sanctioned brothels. Yes, that's right. The same church shouting, "No sex ever," also quietly licensed and taxed sex work. That's not hypocrisy. That's medieval economics. Brothels, the original wellness retreat. Cities legalized brothels to keep society pure, by giving sinners somewhere to moan quietly. But even those came with rules. If you moaned too softly, you were suspected of being a man in disguise. Too loudly, you were disturbing the peace. Moaned just right, you got a tax break. It was the Goldilocks zone of orgasms. Inside brothel life was chaotic. Imagine a 2-room shack filled with a midwife giving birth in the corner, a monk on spiritual retreat, two sisters fist-fighting over a customer who only paid with onions, and presiding over it all. Big Gertrude, the one-eyed madam with goat oil in one hand and a prayer book in the other. She opened shop at dusk and closed when the last night passed out on straw. What about the women? Were they empowered? Not really. Most sex workers didn't choose this. They were orphans, widows, or just too broke to survive. Some thought it would be temporary, like a medieval version of OnlyFans. 10 years later, still there now, with arthritis and a regular client named Sir Sweaty Hands. But even in tragedy, there was survival, community, laughter, and the occasional nun visiting just to look. Guests you'll meet tonight over the next chapters you'll meet. The monk who gets possessed by lust during sermons, the brothel that offers discounts for nights with syphilis, the woman who fakes virginity 32 times a week, and the king who banned sex, then accidentally fell for his cook's niece after she made eye contact while stirring porridge. Because the truth is, you can ban books, you can ban booze, you can even ban dancing, but ban bonking, you don't get holiness. You get chaos. Foreplay. For next. When shame becomes policy, people don't become holy. They just get really creative about where they do it. Behind the church, in a goat shed, next to a plague cart. Love finds a way. Now grab a candle and a weak ale. Because next up, we dive into the architecture of medieval brothels, where the walls were thin, the beds were straw, and the fleas had names. Let's moan on. The sacred origins of the sex worker. Cold open. Before the brothels, there were temples. Long before the brothel, there was the altar. Before the payment, there was the offering. And before the moan of sin, there was the chant of sacred duty. Sounds deep, right? But let's not kid ourselves. Today, if a woman says I'm a sex worker, she'll get everything from side-eyes to sermons. Back in the Middle Ages, they didn't even have the word sex worker. They just pointed and screamed witch but travel even further back way before medieval monks started getting stiffies at confession. And things were different. In ancient Mesopotamia, the original land of writing wheels and weird rituals having sex wasn't sinful. It was sacred. You see, if your crops failed back then, you didn't light a candle and cry in church. Nope. You went to the temple and offered what really mattered, flesh and faith. A dusty, sunburnt farmer kneels before a stone statue of the fertility god. Please, Almighty. Inanna, bless our barley this year. A temple priestess walks in wearing nothing but gold jewelry and an unsettling amount of goat oil. For the blessing, follow me to the back. Bring a goat if you want extra rain. This wasn't considered sin. It was divine logistics. Sex for the gods equals rain for the crops. Win-win, except for the goat. These priestesses weren't random street girls. They were respected, called Kedishtu, which literally means holy women. People lined up to offer their best to them, grain wine, maybe a really fat sheep if they were feeling fancy. They weren't selling it. They were channeling divine energy through pelvis-based rituals. Yeah. Try telling your mom that after Tinder. Even better, the priestesses didn't just lie there. They were trained, educated, knew astrology, poetry, massage, and, let's say, tantric techniques that could resurrect your family tree. Today, we swipe right. Back then, you prayed right and paid in cheese. First time I heard that, I thought it was a myth. But no, people literally blessed cucumbers by banging next to them. Civilization began in a very weird bed, sacred sluts of Sumeria. Long before Instagram thirst traps, OnlyFans subscriptions, or that guy in your DMs sending unsolicited cucumber emojis, sex work was sacred. We're talking about ancient Mesopotamia, Sumer, Babylon. 4,000 years ago, give or take a goat. Back then, a prostitute wasn't a fallen woman. She was a divine employee, a customer service agent of the gods, a literal channel of holy orgasmic energy. They were called Kadishtu, which means the consecrated ones. Not hoe, not wench, not that lady near the date market who smells like camel fat. Consecrated. Put some respect on her name. So what exactly did the Kadishtu do? Simple, she brought fertility to the land by sharing her body in rituals. Yes, your barley harvest sucked. You didn't light incense. You sent your daughter to the temple of Inanna to get plowed for the gods. A confused Mesopotamian farmer at the altar. O mighty Inanna, please bless our wheat. Temple priestess appears oiled in goat butter and gold jewelry. You'll need to come to the back room for that request. This wasn't pimping with extra prayers. It was a sacred duty. Women often volunteered for this role because being a Kadishtu meant power protection and often a very steady supply of aged cheese and poetry from lovesick goat herders. Payment symbolic. 1 jug of wine, a bushel of grain, a pleasingly plump goat. The ancient version of Venmo. Imagine giving up your virginity to bless a field of onions. That's not sex. That's agricultural responsibility. These temple prostitutes were often better educated than most men. They knew songs, spells, erotic poetry, astrology, and where exactly to press on your thigh to make you see God. Unlike today's awkward Tinder hookups, their lovemaking was a ceremony, a sacred bridge between the mortal and the divine. Let's pause for a modern comparison. Meet Enkidu's favorite occupation, fertility technician, preferred offering aged goat cheese and strong Sumerian wine. Special skill makes you see the goddess twice before sunrise zodiac sign Virgo, but only professionally. But then, as always, things went south. Over time, the boys with beards got jealous. Priests, kings, and husbands didn't like their wives being more sexually powerful and spiritually relevant than them, so they rewrote the rules. Temple prostitution slowly faded, and what was once holy became sinful. The Kadishtu went from priestesses of pleasure to side characters in cautionary scrolls, from divine portals of fertility to that harlot down by the canal. Typical. First, they love you for blessing their cucumbers. Then suddenly, you are banned from the temple, 'cause your boobs are too powerful. But here's the kicker. Even as they were erased, their legacy stuck around. Ever heard the phrase, "she's divine in bed"? Ever felt like someone rocked your soul? That's Kadishtu energy, baby. These women walked so modern sex educators, therapists, and yes, even OnlyFans creators could strut. Before there were street corners, brothel beds, and neon signs, there were sacred mattresses made of palm fiber under moonlight, soaked in perfume and prayers. Sex wasn't just sex. It was salvation, with a tip jar. And somewhere out there in the sands of time, a Kadishtu probably smiles every time someone says, "That was a religious experience." From temples to taverns, the decline of divine diddling. Once upon a time, not so long after folks were banging for Baal and moaning for moon goddesses, something tragic happened. People stopped calling sex a prayer and started calling it a business transaction. You see, during the Greco-Roman glory days, the sacred shag took a sharp turn. The gods got booted out of the bedroom, and in came coin purses, contracts, and one awkward grunt of next echoing down a stone corridor. Let's start with the Greeks, those toga-wearing, olive-oiling, drama-loving lunatics. They had the hetairai high-class courtesans who could quote Homer, play the lyre, and dismantle your ego with one witty insult before riding you like a borrowed chariot. These women weren't just bed warmers, they were philosophers with flexible hips. If you were lucky, you got a night of poetry and pegging. If you were broke, you settled for a quick fumble behind the amphitheater with someone named One-Tooth Thalea. Then came the Romans, and by Jupiter, they took things to the gutter literally. Enter the lupanars or wolf dens, because apparently comparing women to wild animals was the height of Roman romance. These brothels were like fast food joints for lust-crude graffiti on the walls, a menu of positions, and the ever-classic sales pitch. 2 denarii, no eye contact in and out before the gladiators finished their lunch. Gone were the sacred moans of temple priestesses. Now it was, next, no refunds if your tunic's still on. The spiritual link between sex and the divine was severed quicker than a eunuch in a bad mood. Sex work shifted from holy rite to sweaty commerce. No more incense, just bad hygiene and the occasional coin lodged in a body cavity. And then, oh boy, the church showed up. Once the holy boys took over Europe, everything got complicated. Suddenly, sex was either for procreation or for burning in hell. If you were a prostitute, congratulations. You were now labeled a filthy sinner and a gateway to Satan's sausage buffet. But also, sometimes the church turned a blind eye. You know, for the economy, hypocrisy. Nah, that's just theology with a limp. By this point, the idea of divine diddling was dead and buried. No more blessing your bonks in the name of Ishtar. Now it was about hiding your shame in alleyways and praying your customer didn't smell like fermented goat. Once upon a time, sex workers were goddesses. Now they're just trying to make rent while dodging syphilis and bishops. Welcome to history, where everything pure eventually gets taxed, outlawed, or morally condemned, usually all three. And remember, in the temple, you came to be touched by the divine. In the lupanar, you're lucky if you don't catch fleas. Catholic panic and clerical boners. By the time we hit the Middle Ages, the Church had officially decided that sex was the root of all evil. Original sin, sex. Lust, sex. Wet dreams, definitely demons. Virginity, basically God's Wi-Fi password. Lose it, and you get kicked off heaven's network. Your soul starts buffering eternally. Prostitutes, according to the church, they were basically Satan's customer service team. Thank you for calling hell. Press 1 to fornicate. press 2, to burn forever. But here's the awkward twist. For all their sermons, bishops knew one thing for sure. Men will hump literally anything if you block all the exits, deny him a lover. He humps a bale of hay, no wife. He starts eyeing the family goat. Too much abstinence. He discovers he's curious about Brother Thomas in the candlelight. So the church panicked and did what the church does best. They made a loophole. They decided, okay, better a man sins in a controlled brothel than sins in a bush behind the choir room. Thus, in many cities, brothels were legalized by the actual church. As long as they paid taxes, stayed quiet after dark, and didn't try to evangelize during the act. The priests said no, but the priests also knew better. You ever seen a monk sprint barefoot out of a nun's cell, holding nothing but his sandals and gilt? That man wasn't escaping temptation. He was escaping her brothers. These religious-approved brothels were usually tucked somewhere between the tavern and the cathedral. Not even kidding. In some towns, they were next door to the church under the logic, if you're gonna sin, at least be close enough to confess immediately after. Imagine bell rings Mass at 9, redemption at 10, back to Brenda, the Blessed, by 11. But let's be honest, the church was never great at hiding its own hypocrisy. Historical document probably suppressed. A bishop's ledger shows brothel maintenance fees listed under facilities and spiritual wellness. Another priest caught visiting the same girl every Sunday claimed she was helping him resist the greater temptation of self-abuse. That's right. They believed masturbation was worse than hiring a prostitute. Because, and I quote, "When a man spills his seed alone, he gives it to Satan. But when he spills it in a paid bed, at least he honors the Lord with community commerce." So let me get this straight. You burn for jerking it, but you're fine if you pay a stranger named Agnes the Merciful. These rules were clearly written by a man who lost to his right hand. Medieval sex policy was inconsistent. No to fun. Yes to guilt. No to love. Yes to loopholes. But behind every brothel tax form, there was one universal truth. Even men who preach abstinence still check what's behind the velvet curtain, and often leave their rosary beads behind. Legalized lust bureaucracy meets bonking. Please sin quietly. God is listening. Turns out, nothing kills the thrill of a good hump like a bit of paperwork. By the late Middle Ages, many European cities had a brilliant idea: if you can't stop the sin, tax it. So began the bureaucratic bonkathon. Sex work was legalized, licensed, and regulated, like a smelly fish market, except with more moaning and less seafood, unless that was your thing. First, you registered with the city, usually with a sweaty clerk who definitely took his work way too seriously. Then came the health checks. These were less medical examination and more groping by Sir Fingalot, an old man with a candle, a shaky hand, and suspiciously good attendance. Prostitutes paid taxes, followed curfews, and obeyed strict noise limits. Some brothels even had posted rules like no climaxing after compline, night prayer, because God needs silence to hear your shame. By city law, brothels were only allowed to operate during designated hours. No late-night shagging unless it was a holy emergency. Some cities even enforced a moan curfew, because apparently the Virgin Mary can't sleep through sex sounds. Signs were nailed to brothel doors like church commandments. Please sin quietly. No screaming God's name in vain. God is listening, and He's judging your technique. In some parts of Italy, sex workers were required to wear yellow veils, the medieval equivalent of a neon "Sin Inside" sign. In London's Southwark district, prostitutes were charmingly called Winchester geese and worked under the bishop's jurisdiction, because nothing says holy oversight like taxing orgasms. And in Germany, some towns declared brothels to be spiritual protection zones. That's right. According to them, a regular rotation of fornication somehow kept demons at bay. Who needs exorcisms when you've got Gertrude and her pelvis of purity, holy neighborhoods, the sanctified sex district? In medieval cities, urban planning got a bit divine. You had your church, your marketplace, and right across the cobblestone alley, your local red light chapel. It wasn't just practical, it was spiritual feng shui. Monasteries were often built suspiciously close to brothels, like walking distance close. Some historians say it was coincidence. Shitty Pete says, coincidence my arse. You ever see a monk speed walking after Vespers? He ain't chasing salvation, he's chasing Sylvia. Brothels even had saintly names for irony marketing, or both. Real examples included the House of St. Mary's Mercy, more like St. Mary's Moisture; Our Lady of the Soft Mattress; Blessed Rita's Warm Welcome; and Pete's favorite, the Chapel of Eternal Yes. And get this, some brothels had a sin to supper deal. You paid for pleasure and got a bowl of warm stew. Pete again, if you ever see a priest leaving a brothel with full cheeks, don't assume shame. That's beef stew in his beard. In some cities, these wholly adjacent humping hubs were considered necessary civic buffers. Better a sinner spills his seed into a licensed bed than onto the altar rail or Brother Thomas's surprised face. Thus, medieval towns evolved around two sacred zones, the Cathedral of the Soul and the Cathedral of the Whole. Between heaven and the sheets, hypocrisy, heresy, and the moan economy. Here's the thing, while the church wagged its finger during daylight hours, that same hand was dropping coins into coin purses come sunset. Double standards. Please. The medieval church had a triple-entry hypocrisy system. They said, sex is evil. Prostitutes are wicked. Also, let's tax them and use that money to build churches. Yep, many cathedrals were partially funded by brothel taxes. Every stone in those Gothic spires might as well have come with a moan echo trapped inside. Quote from a real 13th century bishop: "Better men visit harlots than defile virgins or commit unnatural acts." Translation: sin responsibly, please. And guess what? While women were not allowed to own property, they were allowed to register as public women get taxed and fined for moaning too loud. Neat. Let's check the imaginary Yelp review of a 1346 brothel in Lyon, 5-star, the House of St. Euphemia's Caress. Hay was fresh. The madam gave me a warm towel and a cold confession. Soup was chunky. Sister Beatrice's feet deserve sainthood. Lost a star because the priest next door kept yelling, "Repent," mid-finish. And so, The medieval sex economy spun on one sinner at a time, filling church coffers with every thrust and tip. Ending hook sex was never just sex. Let's be honest, sex work wasn't born from sin. It came from ceremony necessity and a deep human need to feel something besides guilt and plague sores. From Sumerian temples to German spiritual protection zones, the world's oldest profession has been outlawed, taxed, blessed, and blamed, but never erased. Because here's the truth. They weren't selling their bodies. They were offering blessings, one pelvic prayer at a time. Sex work was, and still is, a mirror held up to our most sacred hypocrisies. We want purity, but crave pleasure. We demand piety, but pay for release. And through it all, someone's out there oiling the mattress and lighting a candle. Shitty Pete, of course, has the final word. You can change the laws, shave heads, burn witches, and ban boners. But you can't cancel the world's oldest profession. You can only underpay it. Why? Men seek prostitutes, self-pleasure, the sin of the holy hand. Pete tells it like it is scratching his balls and staring into the distance like a philosopher who once got kicked out of seminary for inappropriate use of candles. Back in the day, jerkin', it wasn't just a private hobby. It was a one-way ticket to hell. See modern lads just unzip in the shower, open an educational video, and call it a stress relief. But in the Middle Ages, you so much as touch your divine dipstick and boom, another soul gets yeeted into eternal damnation. Sounds ridiculous. It was, and yet the church meant business. There was this Pope, Innocent III, ironic, who basically said the left hand is unblessed. Every stroke is a soul falling from grace. Imagine that. They had beef with your hand. What next? Exorcising your elbow. And this wasn't just about guilt. It was full-blown cosmic horror. They genuinely believed your unborn sperm were spiritual beings. Every spurt wasn't just a mess, it was mass slaughter. So if you were a teenage monk in training with a twitchy robe and a curiosity for curves, you weren't discovering yourself, you were becoming a serial killer of invisible babies. Nowadays, men just call it a stress nap with a happy ending. And let's be honest, testosterone doesn't read the scriptures. Your brain might hear resist temptation, but your crotch brain hears challenge accepted. Hence, the crisis. The church told a bunch of sweaty, sword-wielding men to stay celibate. Forever. So, what happened? Well, let's just say sheep got nervous. Some poor bastard confessed to seducing a scarecrow in a moment of weakness. Another carved a hole in a cabbage. Don't even ask about the guy and the communion bread. That's when the powers that be realized maybe it's safer if we let them sin somewhere sanitary. And thus, the first licensed brothels were born. Because if you can't stop the flood, build a holy drainage system. Pilgrim sex tours, where the soul moans too. Pete leans in like he's about to tell you state secrets. Except it's not about politics, it's about peasants and peepees. Back in the old days, when a man couldn't get laid for love or livestock, he packed his bags, kissed his goat goodbye, and headed for the holy city of whorehouses. You see, medieval Europe was repressed like a monk at a wet t-shirt contest. Most men in the countryside had two options. One, Marry a woman who thought orgasms were witchcraft. 2. Die of spiritual blue balls. But once a year, maybe twice, if the barley harvest was good, these poor souls scraped together their silver coins and took what they called a healing pilgrimage. And no, it wasn't to pray. It was to nut with dignity. A line of peasants trudging toward a medieval town with hopeful eyes and slightly guilty erections. At the gates, a banner waves in the breeze. Welcome to St. Hugh's, where your burdens are lightened in 15 minutes or less. These towns had it all. A wellness package, STD check, by a guy who smelled like cabbage. Moan therapy, the girls were trained to wail like sirens in minor key, and of course a pilgrim sex voucher, one night of pleasure and a bowl of stew. Some brothels even gave out stamped certificates. This certifies Brother Thomas of East Farting has successfully climaxed under holy supervision. Bless his balls. They marketed it as a spiritual reset. Forget confession, this was possession, baby. Pete grins. I once met a guy who said his back pain vanished after a session with Sister Belinda. Turns out she cracked his spine during cowgirl. Miracles come in all positions. And, to be fair, it worked. The church looked the other way, the men went home smiling, and the town made enough tax money to fix the chapel roof. Moral of the story: when you suppress the flesh finds loopholes. And in medieval times, the only thing holier than Sunday Mass was Friday night in room 3, behind the tavern. Sex vouchers, medieval loyalty cards for your libido. Pete lights a cigarette. He doesn't even smoke. Just to look dramatic. You think coupons are a modern invention? Think again, medieval dudes had them too, except instead of 10% off bubble tea, they got 100% off one solid shag. Welcome to the wild world of feudal sex vouchers. Yes, it really happened, kinda. Some medieval towns, desperate to keep soldiers from raping random things and merchants from going postal, introduced a genius little invention, the state-sponsored bonk token. What was it? A little stamped piece of parchment that said redeemable for one consensual climax. Must be used before Lent. Non-transferable. Not valid during plague outbreaks. Who got them? Soldiers to reduce battlefield tension and sword humping. Traveling merchants so they'd stop seducing cows. Even government officials as part of emotional hazard pay. Pete chuckles. Imagine a knight pulling out a scroll like, "Behold, one royal fuck granted by His Majesty." And the lady just sighs. Great, another Tuesday. Marketplace madness. These vouchers became hot commodities. Men started comparing them like medieval NFTs. Bro, you got the deluxe one. Mine's just basic. No oral, no eye contact. Some towns even issued limited editions. The Carnival Climax. Special expires, Ash Wednesday. Buy one moan, one free for church fundraisers, VIP holy hour, access front of the line, no hay bales. Meanwhile, wives stood in the kitchen furious. He won't hold my hand, but he'll gallop 10 miles to cash a voucher with a woman named Fanny Delight. I hope he gets lice on his balls. Even priests got involved. Some openly endorsed the program, saying it was better than adultery and technically a form of charity. One bishop even sermonized, "It is more righteous to sin in the arms of a working woman than alone with Satan in one's thoughts. Plus, she pays taxes. That's right, brothel taxes were booming. Cities funded entire bridge repairs, public toilets, and occasionally choir robes with the proceeds of sex voucher usage. Pete leans back. You ever walk across a medieval bridge? There's a good chance it was built on orgasms. The black market bonk. Of course, where there's regulation, there's abuse. Some guys tried faking vouchers, writing stuff like, "My lord said I could have two. Swear on my goat." This is totally valid. I wrote it with my left hand to be modest. Eventually, the church cracked down. Voucher designs got fancy. Wax seals, embossed crests, scented with lavender to hide the stank of desperation. But the message stayed the same. Go bust a nut, then go back to work. Because let's be honest, a sexually frustrated peasant is one bad harvest away from crime. But a post-coital peasant, he'll plow the field, hum a tune, and even compliment his wife's stew. And that, my friend, is how the Middle Ages weaponized orgasms for public peace. The customer files. Horny holy and hilariously hopeless. 600-700 words of medieval madness, narrator. They came in all shapes, smells, and sins. But they had one thing in common, a desperate need for what the church called salvation, and they called, "Just the tip, please. Welcome to the customer files of medieval brothels," where the client list looked less like a sin register and more like a very horny episode of Monty Python. Customer 01 Sir Geoffrey of the nippleless marriage occupation carpenter churchgoer, tragically married. Reason for visit. My wife's so holy, she wears 3 layers to bathe. Sir Geoffrey's tale was sadder than a lute in the rain. He married Edith, daughter of a local priest who believed even eye contact during sex could lead to Satan crawling through your pupils. For 5 years, he had been limited to missionary in the dark once a month on a Tuesday, and only if there were no clouds because God could see better when the sky was clear. At the brothel, he asked the girl if he could just look at a nipple. She gave him 2. He wept. Customer 017, Lord Reginald, who's only seen the Virgin Mary. Naked occupation, local magistrate, 42, Catholic since birth, reason for visit. I thought women didn't have elbows under the robe. Lord Reginald was raised by monks and educated with statues. He thought women were smooth like marble and had no genitals, until a prostitute named Agnes gently explained with a diagram made from bread. His first session ended in 47 seconds and an apology to Jesus. But don't worry, by week 3 he was tipping with sheep and writing poetry about fleshly epiphanies. Customer 049, Little Tom, the Moan Believer. Occupation, apprentice, blacksmith, reason for visit. I heard a woman's moan can fix limp swords. Tom had what we now call performance anxiety. He believed prostitutes had magical voices, moans that could reignite the dragon. A traveling bard once told him a girl named Marjorie had cured 5 men just by whispering yes into their ear. Tom paid for a 10-minute session fully clothed just to sit and listen to Marjorie fake an orgasm. He said it was better than prayer. Customer number 092, Father Humbert, a very thorough confessor, occupation priest, allegedly, reason for visit, medical inspection of female sin zones. Father Humbert wore a robe, held a Bible, and said he was there on behalf of the bishop's committee for pelvic evaluation. He had a stamp, a real one. Every week he came by to check if the girls' souls were clean. He always brought holy oil and left without pants. Shitty Pete says he once saw him yell, "Hallelujah," mid-thrust. Customer number 120, Baldrick, the military man, occupation soldier, professional suppressor of horniness, reason for visit. I have 5 murder charges and 1 erection. Baldrick was granted 3 free brothel tokens per month by the local mayor. The town called it Operation Nut Drop. He said after every battle, he didn't want a drink. He wanted someone to slap him and call him Your Grace. He'd scream, "God bless this whorehouse," every time he came. The moral of the moans. In a time when lust was a crime and love was scheduled, every brothel became a stage where horny men acted out what the church denied them. Some came for healing. Some came for adventure. Some came in 3 seconds. But each little rendezvous was a rebellion, a private protest against guilt, a candle in the cathedral of chaos. They say confession clears the soul, but sometimes a good hump does more for the heart. Commentary Corner: better a whore than a war with Satan. All right, gather round, sinners and saints. It's your boy, Shitty Pete, again here to talk about the customer list that read like the rejected lineup of The Bachelor Medieval Edition. Let me say this first, and I say it with love, and just a little leftover syphilis. Even the priest said it's better to sin with a whore than to stand alone with your stick fighting Satan one-on-one. That ain't my quote. That's straight from a medieval sermon, probably whispered in Latin while someone zipped up their robe. Let's break it down. Sir Geoffrey, bless his dry loins, just wanted to touch a boob that wasn't sculpted by a blind monk. Lord Reginald spent his youth staring at Virgin Mary statues and was shocked when his first naked woman blinked. Little Tom, poor bastard, thought moaning was medicine. Imagine explaining that to your kids one day. Son, I met your mother when I was treating my limpness with sound therapy. And don't get me started on Father Humbert, aka the Holy Inspector of Holes. If he had a nickel for every time he said, "I'm just here for the bishop," he could build his own cathedral. Out of panties. Now I know what you're thinking. Pete, people aren't like that anymore. We've evolved, have we? Back then, a man couldn't get laid unless he showed up with a voucher and a goat. Today, he needs a dating app, 6 shirtless selfies, and to decode 3 years of her Instagram captions. Back then, they feared hell. Now, they fear getting left unseen. Medieval ghosting. That was literal. You didn't get laid, you got haunted. So yeah, say what you want. But the brothel. It was the most honest place in the village. You paid, you prayed, you played. No lies. Small talk. No, what are we conversations. If you're gonna sin, sin like it's 1347, with candles, coins, and a moan that echoes through time. The philosophy of the lower head. Look, you can preach, you can pray, you can chain a man to a pew and drown him in holy water. But if his lower brain gets a signal, all bets are off. That's the truth. The medieval church called it sin. The poets called it desire. and I, Shitty Pete, call it Tuesday. You see, what we had back then wasn't just horniness. It was a full-blown underground belief system, a secret male religion, the philosophy of the lower head, where every decision is weighed like this. Do I want to burn in hell or dry hump a scarecrow? And most men, let's be honest, they took their chances. This lower head logic wasn't about lust alone. It was survival. You couldn't self-pleasure without imagining a demon clapping behind you. You couldn't touch a breast unless it was carved in marble and named Our Lady of Infinite Judgment. So what did men do? They snuck out, paid in grain, moaned quietly and returned to Sunday Mass, smelling faintly of goat cheese and regret. Fast forward to now. We've got sex therapy, OnlyFans, and HR-approved ways to flirt. But the same game is still playing. People still wrestle between body and belief, still make excuses for what their ducks already decided. You can ban the act, burn the books, shave the heads. But once you lock the door too long, a man starts dreaming about what's on the other side. And that, my friend, is how brothels get returning customers. Brothels and bishops, holy, sin in filthy places. Welcome to the brothel where faith meets fungus. You ever walk past a bakery, smell something warm, and think, fresh bread? Well, medieval brothels gave you the same vibe until you stepped inside and realized that ain't yeast, buddy. That's crotch mold and unresolved trauma. See, back in the day, brothels were set up right next to churches. I'm not joking. You could literally hear monks chanting Kyrie Ellison while someone next door was yelling, "Oh God," for very different reasons. From the outside, it might look like a nice rustic inn, maybe even a soup kitchen. But once inside, no beds, no soap, no lighting, just straw lice and an emotional support goat in the corner. If you were lucky, the straw wasn't already sticky. If you were really lucky, the girl wasn't already giving birth. Now me, I've been in a few. For research purposes, obviously. And let me tell you, brothels back then didn't smell like sex. They smelled like desperation, fermented armpit, and the quiet death of spiritual ambition. Some places even had names like the House of St. Mary's Mercy. Mercy my ass. You walk out of there with a limp, a rash, and a prayer. Here's the kicker: bishops made money off this stuff. Oh yeah, they collected a nice little soul redemption tax from every hump. The more you sinned, the more the church profited. It's basically God's version of cashback rewards. I once went to a place with 6 people inside. 2 had visible leprosy. 1 was literally giving birth. 1 was a man with suspiciously soft hands, and 2 were sisters, which raised questions the Bible definitely didn't answer. I stayed for 5 minutes, long enough to get athlete's foot in places athletes don't have. So welcome, my friends, to the medieval brothel, humanity's greatest attempt to find salvation, while naked, itchy, and negotiating prices under a crucifix. And remember, if it smells like a bakery, but nobody's baking, don't open the door. Brothel Design 101. Architecture and amenities or lack thereof. Now listen, don't let your modern expectations fool you. A medieval brothel wasn't some candlelit pleasure palace with rose petals and soft jazz. Nah, it was more like a livestock shed with commitment issues. Let me paint you a picture. You walk in, immediately greeted by the sweet aroma of moldy straw, unwashed bodies, and something that smells suspiciously like goat piss. That's not incense. That's despair. No beds, just a communal pile of straw so itchy even the fleas were scratching themselves. No pillows. Your head goes on your shoes if you still got 'em. Blanket 1, shared by 4 people and 1 feral cat who may or may not have rabies. It bites. You can't blame it. I would too if I had to witness that many hairy asses in one shift. No soap. Oh heavens, no. You want to wash your shame off. There's a bucket out back filled with rainwater, backwash, and probably a dead rat floating in it. Rub yourself with moss and pretend it's exfoliating. And just when you think it can't get worse, some rooms were built next to cemeteries. Yeah, that's right. You could climax and contemplate death in the same breath. One guy finished his session, turned to the girl and said, "Well, I guess I'll just go confess or dig my grave." 2 doors down, same thing. Now for the classic cutaway. Picture a brothel at peak hours, population 6. 2 of them have visible boils and a cough that sounds like sin. One is a man dressed as a woman voice deeper than mine. But hey, when the lights are out and shame's in short supply. One is actively giving birth. Like mid-thrust, she goes, "Hold on, I think the baby's crowning." And the last 2 sisters, real ones, fighting over a drunk knight who paid with buttons and promised eternal love to both of them. You want privacy? Forget it. The walls are so thin, even the rats know everyone's kinks. One sneeze in room 3, and the guy in room 1 finishes early. Still, some folks came back weekly. Not for the comfort, hell no, but because it was the only place where you could feel something between your legs and forget everything above the waist. So yeah, welcome to Brothel Design 101. Where the only architecture was survival, and the only amenity was leaving with your wallet and half your dignity. Coming up next, the medieval sex voucher system, think coupons, but instead of 10% off soup, you get 1 free thrust and a prayer. You ready, sinner? Strategic positioning. Why brothels were always next to churches. Now you might think it's just bad luck or some zoning accident, but no brothels weren't built next to churches by mistake. Oh no, friend. That was city planning with divine precision. See, back in the day after Sunday Mass, some men went to the bakery, others to the tavern, but the really devout ones, they took a hard left and slipped into the brothel next door for a little post-sermon stress release. Nothing like repenting, then relapsing all within spitting distance. And the clergy. Oh boy, they didn't just tolerate the brothel being next door. Many of them endorsed it, visited it, and brace yourself, taxed it. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the church collected what was euphemistically called salvation rent, or, in less polite terms, redemption by the backdoor fees. Imagine a priest ringing a bell like an ice cream man, but instead of sprinkles, he's handing out STD forgiveness in exchange for coin. And if you think I'm exaggerating, check this real quote from medieval moralists. "It is better for a man to sin with a prostitute than to defile a virgin." Translation: God might not approve, but at least you're not messing up a marriage prospect. Go ahead, dip your sin stick in the licensed bucket. Now here's Pete's 2 cents. The church said lust is a sin. But somehow their feet walked straight into the moaning hut every Thursday. These guys were preaching salvation while ordering the blessed double special in the back room. That's not just hypocrisy, that's GPS-guided horniness. Some priests even inspected the brothels under the excuse of pastoral outreach. What exactly they were reaching, no one knows. But we all have a guess. And get this, in certain towns, confessionals shared a wall with the brothel's common room. So if you heard moaning during your Hail Marys, that wasn't a demon. It was Brother Bernard making a very personal donation. Let's not forget the economic side. The church was one of the biggest landlords in medieval Europe. So if a brothel sat on church land, and many did, the church made money every time someone got laid. Sin, my friend, was not just a temptation, it was a revenue stream, which raises a philosophical dilemma. If God is watching and the church is earning, who exactly is the sinner here? And here's the real kicker. Some cities actually placed brothels near churches on purpose to remind sinners of their guilt, as if the path to penance involved a shortcut through pantslessness. But let's be real, guilt didn't stop anyone. The line for confession was often shorter than the one at Madame Bertha's, and half the time it was the same crowd just moving in reverse. So next time you walk past a cathedral and admire its stained glass, just remember, back in the day there was probably a sexton 20 paces away, funded by the same folks who passed the collection plate. And coming up next, the glorious days of sex vouchers, buy one, sin get one free. You ready, pilgrim? We're just getting started. Customer role play. Choose your character. You're not just reading history anymore. You're in it, you horny little pilgrim. Welcome to the 13th century. You've just walked 10 miles into town. Your tunic smells like goat breath. Your feet are bleeding, and your genitals have been sending you passive-aggressive signals since last Lent. You've got 1 copper coin, 2 working nostrils barely, and a raging hard-on powered by boiled cabbage and guilt. The church bells are ringing. You could go in for Mass, but your lower brain is leading you somewhere else. Ah yes, the brothel. Smells like despair, burnt onions, and a hint of moldy hay. Inside, Shitty Pete greets you from a corner puffing a mystery pipe. All right, sinner. You've got 1 shot, 1 coin, and very low standards. Let's pick tonight's spiritual guide. Option A, Maria, the mouth of mercy. Pros: she's got experience. Her nickname is the Whispering Nun because she prays with her lips, just not to God. Cons: she smells vaguely of fermented leeks and hasn't had a full bath since the last crusade. Bonus feature: will sing hymns during the act if requested. May or may not know Latin. Pete Maria once served 3 bishops in a single night. That's not blasphemy, that's efficiency. Option B, Brother Gregor. Technically not a sin. Pros: smooth hands, deep voice. Claims to know acupuncture, although he pronounces it poke-you-puncture. Cons: is clearly a man in a wig. You're not sure if this counts as sodomy or just creative loopholing. Bonus feature offers post-session confession and a mint leaf. Pete: hey, if you squint hard enough and moan fast enough, it's basically a nun with forearms. Option C, mystery behind the curtain. The divine gamble. Pros. It could be anyone. An exotic traveler, a lost duchess, a goat with a wig. Cons. It could be anyone. Bonus feature. If you survive, you unlock a voucher for half off next sin. Pete. Sometimes it's a woman. Sometimes it's a tax collector looking to arrest you mid-thrust. Life's short, roll the dice. Now the choice is yours. Brave lover of questionable decisions. Pete leans in and winks. Don't overthink it. While you're busy deciding, Maria's already halfway through someone else's hymn. A bead of sweat rolls down your back. The hay pokes your thighs. Somewhere a rat scurries under a used blanket. Your lower half twitches impatiently. So what's it gonna be? Pilgrim A, the veteran with a holy mouth. B, the masculine masseur with a moral gray area. C, a curtain and a prayer. Make your choice. Heaven is watching. Pete is judging, and you're still very, very aroused. The holy hustle, when prostitutes had to fight lice sisters and priests. Now you think modern dating is tough, bro. Back in the day, the medieval brothel was like a WWE death match with rickets. Forget soft lighting and sexy sax music. These women were competing harder than fishwives on discount eel day. Let's start with this. A brothel cost less than an inn, but the price you paid was, well, everything else. Cheap sins. Expensive regrets. Pete mutters, scratching his inner thigh with a wooden spoon. Step 1. Out wholly the competition. To stand out in a market flooded with fleas and fake virgins, prostitutes had to get creative. Some memorized verses from the Bible not to repent, but to whisper them during sex. And lo, he beget a full body shiver. Others timed their moans to the church bell hitting that high C as the choir sang Ave Maria. One customer reportedly climaxed right at the line, full of grace. Iconic. Pete nothing, like a spiritual climax to confuse your guilt. Sister versus sister, brothel edition. One night, 2 sisters. Blood sisters, not nuns. Although, let's be honest, lines blurred often, got into a sandal-throwing brawl over a drunk merchant who only had 1 tooth and half a wallet. One accused the other of stealing her psalm-reading technique. The other retaliated with a headbutt and a broken holy candle. The merchant left with neither and cried into his soup. Pete Love is patient. Sisters are not. And then there were the monks. The biggest menace in the medieval sex economy, not the lice, not the church, the undercover clergy. Some priests, robed and self-righteous, would pose as doctors sent by God to check the physical resurrection of the female body. Translation, free boob gropes in the name of the Lord. One guy even brought a wooden cross with built-in stirrups. Medical purposes, he claimed. Arrested 2 years later for giving a sermon with no pants. At least today we have medical degrees and lawsuits. Back then, all you needed was a robe and a creepy smile. Look, I ain't saying it's better now, but at least when a bloke ghosts you on Tinder, he doesn't leave you with lice herpes and a fake confession. Back then, you'd swipe right with a coin and hope she didn't give you the Saint Sebastian special. That's syphilis and stigmata for the curious. Life in the medieval brothel was less Pretty Woman, more Game of Thrones extras waiting to die. To survive, you needed wit, fake hymns, strong thighs, and a very low standard for hygiene. And if you're wondering who won that sister fight, neither. The merchant left them both for Brother Gregor, who threw in a free back rub and no eye contact. Holy bed wars, when prostitutes had to fight lice sisters and creepy monks. Look, being a prostitute in the Middle Ages wasn't some lazy moaning for coins gig. Hell no. It was a full-time job with 0 benefits, 2 diseases per hour, and a daily risk of getting slapped by your own sister. Brothels back then were dirt cheap, literally. You paid less than a bowl of soup, and in return, you got a hay pile, a candle, and an audience of fleas. But competition. Oh, buddy, it was brutal. These women weren't just selling sex. They were performing spiritual cabaret. Some pretended to read the Bible just to impress monk customers. Others moaned in Latin like, "O Sanctus, yes, Dominus. Right there, Dominus." One girl used to time her moans to the rhythm of church bells. Another one tied a wooden cross to her garter belt. I swear to God. And the drama legendary. There was this one time, I saw it with my own crusty eyes. 2 sisters working in the same brothel started pulling each other's hair because a soldier tipped one and not the other. Meanwhile, the soldier was vomiting into his boots, happy as a pig in shit. And don't even get me started on the fake doctors. These so-called holy healers, actually monks with a boob fetish, would come in all serious saying, "I'm here for a sacred body inspection." The Lord needs full exposure. Translation: free tit grabs with divine permission. Absolute legends. Disgusting, horny legends. Pete's take today, guys, try to get laid by swiping right on Tinder. Back then, all it took was a silver coin and the promise to confess later. Fair trade, if you ask me. So yeah, forget your Netflix dramas. Medieval brothels were a mix of Game of Thrones, kitchen nightmares, and holy orders gone wild. And the girls survivors, performers, theologians with nice legs, all in one. Now tell me again how modern dating is hard. Try dodging lice while moaning scripture with a priest watching. The forgotten flesh tales from inside the brothel, where under all the moaning, sometimes there was meaning. You know, people think brothels were just noise, sweat, and STD roulette. And yeah, mostly true. But even in a room full of lice-groaning floorboards and someone giving a handjob behind a curtain, there were stories, real ones. Not all the girls were born into it. Some were widows thrown out by family after hubby caught the plague. Some tried farming, but realized hay moaning pays more than milking cows. Others, they just liked the freedom. I don't care about the sin, one girl told me. At least here I get to yell and no one tells me to shut up. And the customers? Oh, buddy, they weren't always just horny drunkards with pocket lint. One guy came in every week, didn't even touch the girl. He'd just sit there and say, "Can you call me baby?" Just once, she did. He cried, paid double. There was a soldier once, big bastard, smelled like horse and regret. Walked in, saw one of the girls and froze. "God," he whispered, "she looks like Marie." Turns out Marie was his wife. She died last winter. He paid to just lie there. Didn't touch her. Just cried. Then got up, saluted, and left. Even the priest's man. Yeah, we joke about them grabbing boobs and preaching with their pants down. But I saw one once, Father Jacob. He came in, sat on the edge of the hay pile and said, "I don't want anything. I just want to hear someone breathing. Makes me feel alive. No moaning, no touching, just breathing." I know. This is Shitty Pete talking, and usually I'm the guy who laughs at farts and says words like tit blessing. But even I gotta say, among all the filth, disease, and desperate groans, sometimes there was still something called a human being. Then again, I also once saw a man try to hump a scarecrow in the corner, so maybe don't get too sentimental. Anyway, that's the brothel for you. A place full of tragedy, comedy, and hay. Mostly hay. Don't stay too long. You'll catch a disease that doesn't even have a name yet. Let's do a roll call, shall we? The clients. You had your desperate husbands whose wives found God and stopped letting them touch a damn thing. Your religious men who had never seen tits unless carved in marble. The moan heals my soul types, claiming that every groan fixed their back pain. And of course, the monk doctors. "Oh yes, sister, I must check your chest cavity for sin buildup." The ladies. Some were survivors, some just liked to scream. Some quoted Bible verses during the act, and lo, he came again. Others ranted about capitalism before licking your ear. All professionals, some with fleas, most with jokes better than mine. Now I once heard an old priest mutter something after his 7th confession of the day. He said, "Better to lie with a whore than battle the devil with your own staff." Can't argue with that. And listen, people today think ghosting on Tinder is tough. Try medieval ghosting. You didn't just get ignored. You got haunted. "You didn't pay me, Thomas," she whispers at night. And now your balls itch forever. In the end, sex isn't just about sex. It's politics. It's economics. It's religion. It's a flaming cart of straw rolling downhill with someone yelling, "Harder inside." And the brothel. It wasn't just a place to sin. It was the last place where truth, body, and bullshit all sat down and shared a crusty blanket. Sins and fireplaces. Here's the thing no one tells you. You can't ban desire, you can only bend it into strange, twitchy shapes. You lock it up, it finds the window. You call it dirty, it moans louder. You preach against it, and suddenly your choir boy's missing. The medieval brothel wasn't just a pit of disease and desperation. Sometimes, just sometimes, it bloomed into something weirdly human. A hand held too long. A laugh at a joke too dumb. A man paying extra just to hear his name whispered like it mattered. Every groan wasn't just sex, it was a protest. Every sigh a little opera of loneliness and hope. Every awkward thrust, a bad poem in a language made of need. And yeah, there was filth. There was pain. There were rashes that could sign their own name. But even in the dirtiest corners among straw soaked in God knows what, there were moments. The brothel Shitty Pete says sipping wine that might be rat piss was never the end of morality. It was the place where morality sat down by the fire and asked, "Bloody hell, where did we go wrong?" Now go wash your hands, sinner. Next chapter's waiting. Contraception and whore hacks. Horses, garlic, and a touch of bee. Not everything belongs inside you. Back then, avoiding pregnancy was like trying not to laugh when someone farts. You know it's the right thing to do, but you just can't bloody help it. Shitty Pete. So you've woken up in the year 1347, your breath smells like goat stew, and your job, congrats, is to bang at least 6 to 12 plague-breathing blokes a night. You're a working girl in the Middle Ages, baby. And guess what? There's no pill, no plan B, no condoms, unless you count dried sheep guts tied with twine. And even then, good luck getting Sir Sweaty Balls to use it. Pregnancy. That's a career-ending party trick. One bun in the oven, and suddenly, you're not sexy. You're a cautionary tale with swollen ankles and a deadbeat dad who thinks wiping his ass counts as childcare. And the tools, oh honey, you're armed with garlic horse sweat ash from a black cat's butt and enough superstition to summon a demon. Some remedies go in the front, some go up the back, and all of them burn like betrayal. So buckle in, sister. You're not just a medieval sex worker now, you're a one-woman birth control experiment with the church watching your customers snoring and your cervix praying for early menopause. And before you ask, yes, someone really did shove beeswax up there. For protection. More on that sticky horror later. Let's dive into the weird, the wild, and the what the actual F-ski world of medieval contraception straight from the perspective of the professionals who needed it most. Just stick it in the super goat method. Modern folks get latex condoms. We had goat skin sun-dried and smoke-cured, basically a medieval burrito wrapper for your cooch. Like wearing a raincoat made of beef jerky. Welcome, dear viewer/whore in training, to the medieval marvel of engineering the goat gut condom. Or, as we like to call it, the shove and hope method. Picture it. You're about to do the 12th night of the night. He smells like spoiled onions farts with every thrust, and his idea of foreplay is spitting in his hand. Do you scream no? You reach under the bed, pull out your trusty strip of smoked goat intestine, and prepare for battle. Step 1. Cut that goat skin into a vaguely sausage-shaped sheet. Step 2. Dangle it over the fire till it stops smelling like barn. Step 3. Rub it with herbs, maybe, to kill bacteria, maybe to mask the goat. No one really knew. Finally, roll it up and shove it in. Deep, like you're stuffing a Christmas turkey made of regret. It was contraception. It was deodorant. It was interior design. I swear it blocks sperm and blocks smell, said Helga the happy harlot, while shoving in her goat flap like she was installing drywall. And look, it kind of worked. Not because it was effective, but because the smell alone could cancel erections, especially if reused too many times. Some girls hung theirs to dry on the bedpost next to socks and shame. But let's not pretend this was comfortable. A frazzled prostitute squatting over a chamber pot, holding a strip of leathery goat skin the size of a belt. Is this birth control, or am I upholstering my uterus? Another girl in the background helpfully suggests using olive oil as lube. It catches fire when the lantern gets too close. She screams. Pete cackles. Some girls even tried sewing drawstrings into the goat skin so they could pull it back out like a meat tampon. That went about as well as you'd expect. One time it got stuck, and they had to call in Brother Gerald with his holy tongs. The church, of course, declared all of this sinful, but even they turned a blind eye when the bishop's favorite mistress used it. Goatskin may be filthy, but an illegitimate bishop's baby is even messier. In conclusion, did it work? Barely. Did it smell like Satan's laundry basket? Was it better than nothing? Only if nothing doesn't come with a screaming infant 9 months later. But for the medieval working girl, this wasn't just survival. This was craftsmanship. Each goat gut folded, tucked, and inserted with pride, and maybe a prayer that this customer doesn't have warts where he shouldn't. You think you've got it rough with your flavored rubbers and vibrating doodads. Try strapping a smoked animal inside you and smiling while Lord Halitosis rides you like a dying horse. Shitty Pete. Mare, sweat and mourning. P, the medieval uterus, detox cleanse. Drinking mare sweat. That's just medieval kombucha and morning piss. Darling, that's womb espresso. Shitty Pete. So you've tried goat gut condoms. They fell out, reeked of barbecue, and made your cooch sound like a squeaky boot. What's next in your medieval birth control toolkit? Hydration, baby. Or whatever the opposite of hydration is. Enter the detox plan for your uterus, brought to you by witches, drunk monks, and women who have just had enough. Mare Sweat the No Thanks Elixir. In the 1300s, some genius, probably a bald man in a cloak, decided that a mare's sweat, yes, literal horse armpit juice, could convince the uterus to stop accepting sperm like a tavern accepts drunkards. The womb hears frequencies, they said. It reacts to nature's rhythms. What rhythms? Nobody knew. But apparently, a good whiff of wet horse told your womb, no babies today, thanks. I'm full of regret and hay. How was it collected, you ask? Simple. You chase a mare round a field till she's dripping. Then with a wooden spoon or someone's slipper, you scrape the sweat off her underbelly and wring it into a goblet. And then you drink it. No lime, no sugar, just the earthy taste of beast armpit. Morning, pea home brewed. Luck change. Still want extra protection? No problem. Just wake up, squat, collect the first golden stream of the day, and bottoms up. Why? Because medieval logic went like this. If it came from you, it must cure you. By that reasoning, farting in a jar should cure asthma, and sneezing into wine cures heartbreak. But back then, they believed that drinking your own pee, specifically the first urine of the day, could reset your womb, flush out demons, and alter your fertility frequency. Honestly, it was part detox, part desperate prayer, and part, I saw Agnes do it once and she didn't get pregnant. So, the taste of regret. Medieval brothel dawn. Light. A tired prostitute squats over a chamber pot, fills a wooden bowl with steaming golden liquid, and winces at the smell. She lifts it to her lips, muttering, "Well, better this than giving birth to a baby with Walter's ears and his weird toe." She drinks, gags, swears, then swishes some garlic around like mouthwash. Meanwhile, her roommate is waving a mare sweat goblet like it's fine wine. To empty wombs and full coin purses. They clink bowls. One gags, the other hiccups. Hey. Look, you modern folks complain about protein shakes and kale smoothies. These ladies drank horse drippings and morning piss like it was spa treatment. So unless your contraceptive tastes like barn and shame, shut your trap. So yes, mare sweat and pee. That was Plan B in the Dark Ages. Or, more accurately, Plan WTF. Beeswax in the back. the 100% organic anti-baby gel. Smooth, fragrant, mildly flammable, and clings like your ex at closing time. Beeswax up the back door was the medieval girl's secret weapon. Sperm caught like rats in a glue trap. Shitty Pete. So, goat guts didn't stay in. Horse sweat made you smell like a barn. Pee was well piss. What's left for a hard-working girl trying to keep her uterus free of freeloaders' beeswax? In the butt. Yes, you heard that right. Not in the front. Nope, too mainstream. Medieval minds bright sparks that they were figured the back door was the secret passage to contraceptive control. If the sperm can go up the front, maybe they can sneak in from behind. Block that, and you've sealed the gates. Now medically, that makes absolutely no sense. But this is the same era that thought sneezing too hard could launch a baby across a room. So logic. Optional. How it worked, well, worked. Step 1. Melt beeswax until soft and pliable. Step 2. Mold it lovingly into a suppository the size of a medieval breadstick. Step 3. Shove it right up the back alley. Voila! You've got yourself a medieval butt plug / birth control gadget with a fresh floral scent and enough stickiness to trap a damn squirrel. Some overachievers even infused it with garlic or pine resin, either to increase purity or to act as a natural man repellent. If the smell doesn't block pregnancy, it'll at least block DCX. Probably Helga again. The burning truth. Now here's the problem. Temperature control did not exist, and impatient ladies eager to block their baby portals often skipped the let it cool step. A girl lies belly down on a hay pile screaming bloody murder while fanning her scorched bum with a cabbage leaf. It's burning, my arse is sizzling like stew night. But does she remove it? No. Instead, she grits her teeth and says, "Hurts like hell but smells better than the last guy I shagged." That's a win in my book. Commitment, darling. Side effects may include sticky stools, garlic-scented farts, confused boyfriends asking, "Why does it smell like bees and soup in here?" and that unforgettable squelch sound when walking too fast. But hey, you didn't get pregnant. Or if you did, at least your womb smelled like a forest picnic. Y'all think modern birth control has side effects? Try clenching all day with a beeswax suppository up your bum, and tell me how natural that feels. So next time you're lighting your expensive organic lavender soy candle, just remember your great-great-great-granny may have shoved a similar candle up her butt to avoid becoming somebody's 12th baby mama. History is sticky, mate. And it burns. The medieval contraception booth. Welcome to the black market of the pelvis. Quick pregnancy prevention. No more panicking upside down on a banana tree at dawn. Old Lady Gertrude vendor and local herbal hustler. Location a mud-slick village square, sandwiched between the guys selling boiled rat and a monk shouting about eternal damnation. One sad table, a straw roof, and a crooked wooden sign that reads, "Contraceptives trade for duck eggs or curly hair." Yep, that's our girl, the medieval apothecary of your ovarian dreams or nightmares. A one-stop shop for anti-baby miracles built entirely on superstition, desperation, and very questionable hygiene. The hottest products on the market. 3-day fermented garlic water. Drink it, and your lover loses all interest. Distilled from garlic left fermenting in goat spit, for 3 days. This potion doesn't stop sperm. It stops desire itself. 1 sip, and you smell like regret, marinated in socks. Black hole, wax saploden. Seal your gates like a fortress under siege. A tar-like paste applied where the sun don't shine, literally designed to block every possible exit and entrance. You're basically gluing your junk shut. Camphor Essence Inner Thigh Edition. Cold thighs, dry womb. Rub this cooling balm between your legs and feel a winter breeze in your groin. Not only does it numb your hopes and dreams, it also terrifies horny nights into abstinence. Black cat ashes. Sprinkle of mystery. Blow it on your belly. Pray. Hope. Repeat. Believed to confuse the fetus spirits, this product is 50% superstition and 50% ash from a cat that may or may not have existed. The sales pitch. You can't unhear enter old Gertrude, a 70-year-old potion peddler with a wart shaped like a wizard hat and a voice like she gargles gravel. She's been yelling all morning. Prevent babies fast. No more cartwheels in the moonlight. Trying to shake it out. Buy 2 saps. Get 1 rat tail free. Cramps. That's just your uterus clapping for freedom. She lifts a flask of garlic water like it's fine wine, winks and shouts. Put this in your tea and your man will crawl out the window. Gagging. No sperm left behind. Customer reviews. Totally real. We swear drank the camphor stuff. Couldn't feel my legs for 2 days. 10:10. No baby. Used the wax. It stuck to my skirt. I still wear it as armor. I blew cat ash and sneezed on a bishop. My womb's clean, but now I'm excommunicated. Modern pharmacies give you pills in boxes. Back then we got mystery goo in jars labeled, maybe works, maybe curses you. But hey, no kids, right? So, there you have it. The medieval contraception market in all its muddy, smelly, cat ash glory. And remember, if it smells like soup and burns like truth, it's probably working. Folk remedies, garlic in the cooch and lemon on the belly button. Once mid-session, I smelled garlic, thought the kitchen was on fire. Turns out she was steam cleaning her uterus. Shitty Pete. Welcome to the DIY Spa Day Medieval Edition. Forget essential oils and jade eggs. If you were a woman trying not to get pregnant, you worked with whatever was on the pantry shelf and prayed. Garlic Internal Security Guard. The method, simple shove a raw clove of garlic right up the baby portal. The logic kills germs and kills the mood. Women believed garlic's natural antiseptic powers could fry sperm like sausages in a skillet. Bonus, it scared off men vampires and anyone with functioning nostrils. My body, my choice of seasoning. Lemon and vinegar. Acid trap for sperm. The other crowd favorite, lemon juice mixed with vinegar smeared directly on the belly button. Why the navel? Because apparently, medieval sperm were Olympic swimmers who tried to climb in through the torso. Lemon was thought to electrify the womb if any rogue sperm reached the citadel. Science? Nah. Vibes. Hell yeah. Customer mid-pump freezes. What's that smell? Is that a stew? She smiles calmly, legs in the air. Nope, it's birth control, with notes of citrus and regret. Q-Man scrambling off the bed, pulling on trousers, gagging. Birth control was basically survival. Let's be honest. Every method you've just read sounds like it came from a drunk goblin with a cookbook. And yet, this was real life for medieval sex workers. No pills. No plan B. Just garlic, wax, pea, fire, prayer, and raw determination not to become the mother of Steve the Squire's 12th bastard. These girls weren't just hookers. They were mad scientists with a candle, a horse, and nothing to lose. The creativity, 10-10. The effectiveness. Somewhere between haha and ow. Shoving beeswax up your butt, drinking sweat, gluing your nethers shut with tree sap. These weren't choices. They were the only tools left when the world gave you nothing but judgment and vinegar. Sex was dangerous. Love was lethal. And childbirth, basically Russian roulette with no bullets removed. So next time you complain about modern birth control messing with your mood, just remember, at least you're not squatting over a bowl of piss while stuffing garlic into your hoo-ha. If the Nobel Prize gave out medals for sheer desperation, some girl with camphor thighs and a spicy butt plug would have won it centuries ago. Shitty Pete Finn got a disease. Rub some shit on it. The opening one itch away from insanity. Every time I scratch, I reconsider life choices. Be a whore or a medieval lab rat. Shitty Pete. Back in the ye olde times of dirt dung and dumb ideas, catching an STI wasn't a question of if. It was a matter of when and how itchy. For sex workers, the odds weren't just stacked. They were building an entire tower of burning hay and shoving you inside with a grin. There were no antibiotics, no understanding of bacteria. Hell, most people still thought disease came from bad smells, or maybe a goat sneezing in your direction. Medicine. Oh, sweet summer child. Medicine was a man in a robe rubbing snake guts on your privates while chanting about balancing your inner humors. For the working girl, every encounter was like playing genital roulette with rusty bullets. One night, it's a knight in shining armor. The next, it's Sir Itch-a-Lot with a boil the size of a goose egg. And when the burning began, you didn't go to a doctor. You went to a guy with 3 teeth and a cart full of herbs, rat tails, and something suspiciously jiggly in a jar. The worst part? The treatments were often more terrifying than the disease itself. Got sores? Let's slap on some mercury. Burning down there ever tried roasted rabbit liver compresses? STIs weren't just infections. They were invitations to be the unwilling participant in a Renaissance-era cooking show gone wrong. Welcome to Bake It or Break It, ye vaginal edition. And in that chaos, the brave women of the night did what they could clench, pray, and maybe rub a little garlic on it, just in case. Poop Earth's finest gift in the worst possible way. Got genital sores? Slap on some horse dung. Itchy downstairs. Try cow crap. Heartbroken. Maybe bird poop will do the trick. Back in the wild days of medieval medicine, poop wasn't just waste, it was wisdom. Or so people believed. Animal dung was considered a holy grail of earth energy, loaded with mysterious healing powers. If it came out of the rear of something four-legged, someone out there thought it could save your vagina. The cure? Nobody asked for whether you were dealing with boils, itches, or full-blown syphilis. There was a dung treatment for you. The most popular combos were horse dung plus garlic plus camphor, the luxury blend. Cow dung crushed mint for a fresh meadow scent. Donkey dung solo for the minimalist experience. All were applied directly to the genitals, covered with a layer of rough burlap or hemp cloth, and left overnight to draw out the toxins. If you woke up still alive, congratulations, you were officially cured. Organic spa gone wrong. Medieval healers swore by the logic, if it came from nature, it must be good for you. Unfortunately, so did rabies and leprosy. But logic wasn't exactly thriving back then. Some healers even got creative fermenting dung with herbs, letting it age for extra potency. One claimed 3-week-old cow dung is like fine wine, more healing, more kick. Kick indeed. One poor soul suffered burns and passed out from the fumes. The healers reply, that means it's working. The stink is attacking the disease. Picture this. A woman lifts her burlap skirt in the moonlight, whispering to her boyfriend, honey, why is your medicine still making mooing noises? Turns out the dung was a bit too fresh. The healer had rushed it straight from the pasture without checking for passengers. She screams. The boyfriend faints. The cow watches in judgment. The logic behind the madness. People believed poop contained primal heat to fight infection, was full of animal spirit that scared off demons and disease, formed a natural barrier between evil air and the body. In reality, all it did was invite more infections, rashes, and the occasional maggot party. But in a time without antibiotics, without doctors who weren't also part-time alchemists or drunk monks, people clung to anything that sounded remotely like healing, even if it smelled like hell. In the end, if you ever feel gross using hand sanitizer for the 5th time in a day, just remember. Somewhere in history, someone was squatting in a stable smearing horse turds on their genitals, hoping for salvation. Medicine has come a long way. Thank God. Snake meat, slap it on, and hope for the best. Syphilis, easy fix. Just slice up a live snake and wear it like a hell-flavored panty liner. In medieval times, when someone said, "You've got the pox," the treatment options were basically 1. Die. 2. Do something horrifying with reptiles. Enter the snake, the wiggly worm of doom. It slithered into the role of natural healer simply because it looked sneaky. That's right. The logic went, snakes look like they know secrets. Maybe they can steal disease too. The classic method. Grab a live snake, chop it into slimy little chunks, and slap those bad boys right on the infected area. You've got boils on your bits. Boom meat sashimi applied vaginally. Syphilitic sores. Bam snake nuggets in your lady garden. The effect? Mostly cold, a bit wet, 100% traumatic. But wait, there's more. Some very serious healers insisted the patient hold a live baby snake in their mouth for 15 minutes. Why, you ask? Because, and I quote, it draws the heat out through the breath. You're shaking, gagging on a wiggling reptile, wondering if your vagina will ever be okay again, and the local apothecary just nods solemnly like he's Einstein. Hilarious scene in progress. A poor working girl sits legs apart, a slimy snake fillet stuck to her burning bits, face pale as cheese. She yells, "What now, doc? Should I grill it too? Might as well have dinner while my crotch gets exorcised." Another girl peeks in. I heard soaking it in mead first makes it smell better. Meanwhile, across the room, a nun walks in, sees the snake set up, and slowly backs out like she just walked into a satanic picnic. Did it work? Not really. You still had the disease, but at least now you also had a snake rash and mild PTSD. Double combo. If someone in medieval times offers to treat your STD with something they just wrestled out of a bush, kindly decline, or run. Rabbit liver and pigeon broth. A scrotal spa from hell. Your willy's red like a chili. Just slap on some grilled rabbit liver and it'll glide like a summer melon. Welcome to the world's most questionable wellness retreat, Spa Tri Liu Vung Hang Medieval Edition TM. When your bits start itching, burning, or looking like they belong in a horror museum, it's time to head to your local medieval healer, which usually meant an old lady with one eye, 3 cats, and a collection of rabbit organs. Let's start with the classic cure for the inflamed penis, grilled rabbit liver. That's right. Take a rabbit, roast its liver until it's nicely charred, then slap that sucker right onto your junk like a hot meat patch. Supposedly, the heat neutralizes the fire of infection, or in more modern terms, it just cooks your cock for good measure. Now, if your balls are burning, or feel like they've been in a slap fight with the devil, then comes the pigeon water treatment. Yes, boil a pigeon whole until it creates a broth of sadness and regret. Let it cool for spiritual safety and your testicles' sake. Then dip your boys in that birdie brew for 7 full days. 7 days. No breaks, no cheats. Just you, your giblets, and a simmered avian soup. Scene of glory, Tmeng. A grown man is laid out on a wooden bench, trousers off balls, steeped in a clay bowl full of lukewarm pigeon broth. He sighs. Do you think they're soft enough yet? Another hour. The healer grunts while chewing on raw celery. Can someone at least test the stock? He tries to turn, but sloshes broth onto his leg. The pigeons outside coo in silent judgment. But why rabbit and pigeon, you ask? Rabbit, fast, warm-blooded, believed to absorb heat and carry away the disease. Pigeon, soothing symbol of peace, and according to one healer, spiritually aligned with testicles. No one questioned this logic, because in a world without penicillin, sometimes you just boil a bird and hope. Did it work? No idea. Most guys probably got an infection from the broth before the STI had a chance. But for a brief broth-soaked moment, they believed. They believed in the healing power of poultry balls and bunny guts. Spiritual science, semen cools the brain. Got mental problems, just release. Your mind'll be chill like ice on a frying pan. Believe it or not, some ancient medical texts really pushed the idea that ejaculation helps cool down the brain. The logic semen is a hot fluid created by the body, and letting it out balances your inner fire. Mental stress, madness, overthinking, simple fix, go, bust a nut. And thus, the holy doctrine was born. Sex is therapy, bro. This turned prostitutes from pleasure workers into unofficial mental health technicians. Had a breakdown, anxiety, seeing demons in the soup. You didn't need a therapist. You needed a trip to the brothel for a neurological cleanse. Men lined up convinced that their stress would vanish with one good session. And who got to carry that weight? Yep, the girls now tasked with absorbing the collective anxiety of the entire village. Picture this. A grown man tears in his eyes, stripping off his tunic at the door of a brothel. He sniffles, "I'm not sick, darling. I just need to cool off my brain." "With your help," she sighs, mutters again, and grabs a candle. Therapy time. The legendary prescription's wisdom scribbled on a wall. They didn't have doctors. They had wall wisdom. You walked into a medieval town square feeling itchy in all the wrong places, and some old man with goat hair for eyebrows would say, "Aha! Your penis is red, classic case. Roast a rabbit's liver, don't eat it, slap it on while it's still warm. That'll calm the fire snake, feeling a fiery sting in your balls." No problem. The village healer would point you to his backyard, where a sad pigeon boiled in a clay pot. "Soak your jewels in this stew. 7 days minimum. If they turn blue, that's the toxins leaving. Got weird spots on your genitals? Forget creams. You'd get handed a magic paste made of clay, your own urine and cat ashes. DIY skincare at its most cursed. And if you had syphilis, bleed it out first, they'd say. Poke it till it leaks, then bandage with a root. Mugwort is best if you can steal some from a witch's garden. One night at the tavern, 3 healers argued so loudly the pigs stopped chewing. Cow dung with pig fat is the cure. No rabbit liver, still steaming. You fools, it's pigeon broth or death. Meanwhile, in the corner, a girl with cat ash on her thighs just wanted to go home. Because in the Middle Ages, medicine wasn't about science. It was about confidence, yelling louder than the other guy, and rubbing something dead on something worse. Laughing to keep from crying. Medieval sex workers weren't just lovers, they were frontline survivors. Their weapons, a live snake and a bowl of urine. Their armor, dried pigeon stew, and unshakable sarcasm. Forget the glamorized courtesans you see in movies. These women were fighting off syphilis with rabbit livers, blocking sperm with bee wax up the butt, and trusting a man named Shitty Pete to tell them it was working. And the best part, they had no idea if any of it worked. Every treatment sounded like a dare from a drunk wizard. Try this, they were told. What is it? Molten mercury. Just sit on it. Sounds legit. They weren't just selling sex. They were the crash test dummies of ancient medicine. Poked, smeared, roasted, and occasionally exonghoi bang shit. And yet, they laughed. Somehow, between the burning crotches and talking pigeons, they cracked jokes, rolled their eyes, and kept going. One woman once said, "If I'm gonna itch anyway, might as well get paid for it." That's resilience. That's chaotic bravery. They lived. They suffered. They improvised. And in the absence of science, they made comedy their coping mechanism. Because when life gives you herpes and no antibiotics, you wrap it in cow dung, sprinkle cat ash, and laugh your infected ass off. God bless those chaotic queens. They walked so we could pee without fear. Managing prostitutes, clowns, pigs, and hot irons. Medieval prostitutes were like e-wallets. Everyone used them, but nobody wanted to admit it. In the grand theater of medieval hypocrisy, prostitutes were the most overused and underloved characters. Society desperately needed them, but also desperately needed to shame them for existing. It was like depending on your phone for everything, then blaming it when your life sucks. These women weren't just workers. They were walking contradictions, forced into a role the world refused to acknowledge, yet couldn't live without. Want privacy? Too bad. Once you were in the game, everyone knew. Literally. They made you wear bells around your neck, like a tragic cow with a subscription to shame. Worse, you had to parade around like a circus reject, cone hats, loud outfits, and a face that said, "This isn't fashion, it's punishment." Think of it as being stuck in a never-ending medieval reality show where the goal was to be humiliated in surround sound. What makes it extra spicy is that the same men yelling sinner at you in public would show up whispering you up behind the tavern at night. In short, prostitution in the Middle Ages was a full-time job with zero benefits, maximum disgrace, and mandatory bells. It wasn't just a job, it was a sentence. And society. Oh, it played judge, jury, executioner, and client. Welcome to the medieval HR department, where your uniform is a jester hat, your title is spawn of Satan, and your job security is as stable as a candle in a brothel. Medieval side fashion bells, fool hats, and the wardrobe of shame. Being a prostitute meant walking around like a medieval clown with a GPS collar. Ding-a-ling, incoming judgment. Forget haute couture. Medieval fashion for sex workers was a bold blend of humiliation, shaming accessories, and unsolicited cosplay. The idea was simple. If you couldn't erase them, at least make them visibly ridiculous. First off, the bell. Yes, an actual bell tied around the neck like they were rebellious goats that escaped the farm. The purpose? To alert people of their presence like a walking moral alarm. You hear a ding-ding and everyone knows, ah yes, sin has entered the chat. Then came the hat. Not a classy bonnet, not even a decent hood. No, these girls had to wear tall, pointed cone hats. Think wizard on probation or clown who got fired for being too tragic. In some places it had feathers. In others it looked like they stole it from the court jester's drunk uncle. Stylish, memorable. Unfortunately, yes. Their clothes, bright clashing colors stitched together like a Pinterest fail. Yellow, pink, and green in one outfit, making sure no one missed them, even from a tower window. The goal wasn't elegance. It was maximum humiliation with a side of unwanted attention. In certain cities, these outfits were so absurd that prostitutes looked like mascots from a cursed carnival. One eyewitness account described them as human flags of sin, waving shame through the streets. Lovely. But here's the wild twist: this backfired. While society tried to shame them, the same gawkers who mocked were also lining up behind the tavern at night. And the girls? Oh, they leaned in. Comedy sketch moment. A prostitute struts down the cobbled street, bell jingling, cone hat wobbling, looking like a psychedelic chess piece. A man stares. She snaps. What never seen a woman with premium jingles? Before I don't do discounts. Honey, the bell's full price. They took the ridicule and flipped it. What was meant to be a scarlet letter became a branding tool. Medieval marketing baby. They turned shame into sass and ridicule into recognition. Bell audible ads, hat brand identity. Outfit street-level influencer drip. In the end, what society tried to weaponize became just another part of the performance. And these women, they kept walking, loud, proud, and fashionable in the most chaotic way possible. The Great Whore Parade, public shaming, or accidental marketing. When they said I'd be part of a parade, I thought it was a promotion. Turns out it was just a well-organized humiliation tour. Welcome to medieval Europe, where cities didn't just punish sex workers, they paraded them. Literally. In some proud and holy city-states, local governments would organize full-blown processions of prostitutes. The goal, public shaming. A warning. A spectacle. Girls were lined up dressed in their mandatory circus couture, marched through crowded streets under the watchful eyes of God-fearing citizens. But here's the kicker. Instead of scaring people off, these parades had the opposite effect. They turned into free advertising. Imagine this. Dozens of sex workers jingling down the street in bright outfits and shame bells while onlookers lined the sidewalks. Officially, it was to yell insults and wave judgmental pitchforks. But unofficially, people were whispering. Second one from the left looks familiar. Is that Helga from East Tavern? She's taking clients again. The idea was, let's teach society a lesson. The result was, let's help society make reservations. Mixed messages galore. On one hand, shame filth degenerates. On the other, hey, do you have her rate card asking for a friend named Jeff? What was supposed to be a scarlet letter became a walking Tinder lineup. As the girls walk by in full humiliation mode, an old man stands at the corner holding a sad bouquet of weeds. He mutters, "Disgraceful creatures, absolute scandal. Do they do discounts on Sundays?" Some cities even printed pamphlets about the parade, detailing who got caught, what the charges were, and where she was stationed for disciplinary reasons, of course. It was like a Yelp page mixed with public punishment. One chronicler from the 1300s wrote, "Though the event was to shame, I noticed many men took special care to attend each week." No kidding, brother. In the end, the parade system collapsed under its own irony. Cities wanted to shame women for being visible, but made them more visible than ever. Sex work didn't slow down. It got brand awareness. Moral of the story: if you try to shame someone with a marching band and streamers, don't be surprised when they turn it into a business opportunity. And the girls, they played along. Heads held high, bells jingling with sass, they strutted like runway models from the seventh circle of hell. Because if society insists on watching, might as well give them a show. The branding iron. Why must it burn all the way to the butt? Being a prostitute wasn't enough. You had to come with a logo. No brand, no business. No ass scorch, no service. In some medieval cities, just being known as a sex worker wasn't public enough. No, they needed a permanent reminder, a mark that screamed, "This one sells it even from behind." So what did the wise men of law come up with? A red-hot branding iron, straight out of the Animal Farm Handbook. Women suspected or convicted of sex work were branded like cattle, usually on the shoulder or the buttocks. You know, the classy spots. The mark could be a letter like P for prostitute, or a nice tasteful symbol like a flame, a beast, or sometimes an actual penis. Because subtlety was not invented yet. The logic, once branded, always a whore. Even if she wanted to leave the trade, the scar would follow her into every job interview, wedding, and trip to the public bathhouse. Think of it as a medieval LinkedIn endorsement for all the wrong skills. As the branding iron sizzles into her skin, one girl screams, "Oh, you might as well stamp a QR code back there. At least let clients scan me for directions." This wasn't justice. It was permanent humiliation as policy, and it worked. Not because it stopped sex work, but because it made sure no one could ever forget it. A literal hot girl brand, just not the kind anyone wanted. Marrying a pig. A wedding so absurd it deserves an Oscar. She committed the crime of improper copulation. Her sentence: marry a pig and do it in front of God and everybody. Yes, you read that right. In the golden age of morality and manure, aka medieval Europe, if a prostitute got pregnant outside the state-approved sleaze system or was found guilty of lustful behavior, aka existing as a woman with hormones, her punishment might be marriage to a pig. No, not a nickname. A literal, grunting, four-legged swine. This wasn't just some metaphor for you married badly. This was a fully officiated ceremony featuring a priest, a bridal wreath, a very confused pig in a bow tie. The purpose: utter humiliation. The logic went something like, if she's going to act like an animal in heat, let her marry one. Bravo, medieval legal system. What a sophisticated approach to justice. The wedding would be public, of course, because humiliation only counts if it's witnessed by at least 300 villagers and 12 children with trauma for life. The priest solemnly reads, "Do you take this boar to be your lawfully wedded husband in sickness and in slop?" The woman deadpans, "At least he won't cheat on me with the milkmaid." The audience, half horrified, half howling with laughter, because somehow in this grotesque farce, the girl marrying a pig became both the joke and the only one making sense. These ceremonies were part performance art, part punishment, and fully medieval madness. They didn't solve anything. They just turned social shame into a community event with snacks and livestock. Even worse, in some records, the pig wasn't just symbolic. Trials were held where women and animals were co-defendants, and if found guilty, which they always were, the pig didn't have a great lawyer. Punishment could be execution for both. Till death do you part, taken way too literally. What's the takeaway here? Society hated women with autonomy so much they said, "You love sin, fine. Here's a pig. Tie the knot and let God sort it out." And somehow, through the pain and public mockery, many women survived, emotionally, mentally, and with enough sass to crack a joke during their own pork-themed wedding. So yes, medieval justice was absurd, cruel, and sometimes accidentally hilarious. But the resilience of these women, legendary. Next time you complain about a bad Tinder date, just be glad you didn't have to say "I do" to a muddy hog in front of your entire village. Pregnant prostitutes. Wombs of the devil, the child you carry, is surely the spawn of Satan. But just to be safe, give birth first. Then we'll toss it into the woods later. In medieval times, getting pregnant out of wedlock was already a big no-no. But if you were a prostitute, well, congratulations, you weren't just immoral, you were a direct gateway to hell. Society looked at a sex worker with a baby bump and saw one thing: a demonic vending machine. They didn't call it a child. They called it a demon in disguise, a ghost seeking rebirth, a goblin trying out a new life plan. And that wasn't just the town drunk mumbling nonsense. Even some priests and midwives backed it up with the medieval science of, "It sounds scary, so it must be true." The midwife leans over, squints at the pregnant belly, and mutters, "Looks normal. But we'll have to wait until birth to check if the baby has horns." The girl sighs. Hope it's just a tale this time. Because of these ridiculous beliefs, many pregnant prostitutes were banished from towns like human contagions, locked up in barns or stables to give birth among cows because apparently birds of a feather, forbidden to see their own child assuming it even lived. And the worst part, they weren't even the ones asking for this situation. Most pregnancies came from clients who refused protection, priests with double standards, or nobles who vanished faster than a fart in the wind. But who got punished? The woman. Always the woman. Because somehow she seduced society into screwing her and then blamed her for it. Some towns had officials whose job was literally to inspect pregnant prostitutes and decide if the fetus looked too evil. We'd like to remind readers ultrasounds weren't a thing, just vibes and superstition. If the child was born healthy, still suspicious. If the child cried too much, must be haunted. Didn't cry, possessed for sure. And if the mother wanted to raise it herself, forget it. Many were stripped of their rights, forced to give up the baby, or told to leave town immediately because no one wants a mother of evil in the village. What does this all tell us? That medieval people would have burned a copy of Sex Education and accused Netflix of witchcraft. And yet, these women called monsters, locked away, humiliated, dehumanized, still gave birth, still tried to love their kids, and still made jokes about whether their baby would have goat eyes. So next time someone talks about the good old days, ask them, "Do you mean the part where single mothers were accused of birthing Satan? Because if that's nostalgia, we'll pass." The job everyone hated but no one could erase. Society banned them, yet used them. Medieval prostitutes lived between two worlds, repeat customers and secret snitches. Prostitution in medieval times was the ultimate paradox. On paper, it was forbidden, shameful, immoral, a threat to the social fabric. But in practice, it was essential. The same men writing laws against indecency were sneaking out at night to visit their favorite wellness providers. Prostitutes were managed like criminals dressed like circus mascots and punished like witches. And yet, society couldn't live without them. Why? Because desire doesn't care about laws, and neither does hypocrisy. These women weren't villains. They were survivors doing what they had to in a world that gave them no real choices. Yam scapegoats, blamed for the desires of men who couldn't own up. Performers turning every humiliation bell's dunce hats, fake weddings with pigs into a form of resistance. They made jokes out of tragedy, turned mockery into survival. And even when called demon wombs or sinful temptresses, they found ways to laugh at it all. Their existence exposed a truth society didn't want to face. That repression doesn't remove desire. It just hides it in shame and shadows. And so these so-called shameful women did something remarkable. They endured, not because they were protected, not because they were respected, but because they were needed, and they knew it. So the next time someone says sex work has no history of strength or strategy, just remind them once upon a time a woman got forced to marry a pig and still came out with the best punchline. We laughed at them because history made them a punchline. But once the laughter fades, who still sees the woman beneath the makeup and the jester's hat? When the lights go out and the stage clears, what's left is not a sinner or a joke, but a human being no one ever chose to be. This is not the story of disgrace. It is the story of survival. Flowers that didn't choose to bloom in the dirt, a side story. The lives of medieval prostitutes, more to pity than to blame. A life not chosen. No one is born dreaming of selling their body under flickering torchlight. The old woman sat by the hearth bones, creaking like the wooden stool beneath her. Her hair, once the color of chestnuts, had thinned to silver threads. Her eyes were sharp, not with anger, but with the clarity of someone who had nothing left to hide. They called us whores, wenches, demons in skirts, she said, voice rasped by age and pipe smoke. But no one ever asked why we were there in the first place. She tugged at the rough shawl on her shoulders, hands still steady despite the years. Outside, rain tapped against the thatched roof like whispers of ghosts she had long outlived. You think any of us wanted that life? She asked no one. Or maybe everyone. I was 12 when the plague took my parents, 14 when the landlord said I could stay in the house for a price, and 16 when I realized I was no longer a girl, but a service. Her voice carried the weight of things, unspoken beatings behind tavern doors, pregnancies that ended in stables, and men who never learned her name. Some of us ran from violence, some ran from hunger, and some we just had nowhere else to go. The church called us sinners, the men called us temptresses, and the women, she paused, they looked at us like trash. Their husbands stepped in. This is not just a story of shame, nor lust, nor scandal. It is a story of survival, of laughter stolen between broken teeth, of love that bloomed in brothels of humanity, scraped from the floor of an inhuman world. She leaned forward, eyes gleaming. You want to know what it was really like? She smiled just a little. Then sit down and listen. A household of hazards. From home to the alley, it was all just different shades of danger. No girl dreams of lace when her blanket is mold. No child clings to a doll when her arms are full of firewood. In the lower alleys of medieval towns, where the smell of piss fought with the scent of bread from windows above, most girls didn't walk toward brothels, they were pushed. Father drank, said one woman, her voice as dry as the bread crusts she once fought rats for. Mother coughed blood every winter. No one remembers which one of us died first, the dream or the body. Some girls were orphans by plague. Others had parents too poor to count. And some were sold off before they could even name the days of the week. 12 years old was old enough to scrub the tavern floor. 14 was ripe. If a man with coins wanted her, she was taken. Consent wasn't a word anyone taught her. My uncle said I was too mouthy, whispered another. So he taught me silence, every night, until silence was all I had. When the bleeding didn't stop, they didn't call a healer. They called her a whore, ruined, unfit for marriage. So into the street she went. Sometimes it wasn't violence, just desperation. A girl named Lise once stood by a dying fire, her little brother asleep beside her. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. The neighbor offered soup for a night. She took it. Then another, then eventually she found herself working for the woman who ran a tea house that served no tea. If I didn't get money, she said he would starve. I chose being called a slut over watching him die. That was the math of poverty. For girls born into the lower rungs of society, serfs, street orphans, day laborers' children, there were 3 career options: wife, if pure, servant, if lucky, or unclean, woman if not. Literacy, only if a priest took pity. Dignity, that cost extra. The world didn't care what broke them, only that they stayed broken quietly. And yet, even among the cracked and discarded love still flickered. In one village there was a girl named Bruna, 12 years old. Her father sold her to a passing merchant with a job. As they led her away, she turned back to her 6-year-old brother, barefoot, sniffly, hugging a crust of bread. She knelt down, wiped his nose with her sleeve, and said, "Chi di lam sa. Em rang hak chu nge chua dung yu chi. I'm going to work far away. You learn your letters, okay? Don't be like me." She kissed his forehead and left with the man. She never came back. But he did learn to read. That's the kind of tragedy you don't write into fairy tales. Illness, when the body becomes a battlefield. It wasn't the disease that killed us first. It was how people looked at us. Her legs shook, but she still had to smile. Her back burned, but she still had to bend. Her body was no longer hers. It was a war zone fought over nightly. And every morning she woke up with fewer soldiers on her side. The medieval world feared disease, but no one feared it like the women whose job was to be touched. Syphilis, gonorrhea, chancroid, things with names like curses and symptoms that felt like slow fire. They spread fast in brothels, faster in the streets, and fastest in whispers. She's got the devil's rot. Her blood is boiling with sin. There were no antibiotics, no condoms, no clinics. Only cures brewed in madness, mercury drops straight into the vagina. Sitting on live coals with a snake under the chair. Or the infamous blessing of dung. A mixture of horse manure and old wine slapped onto infected parts like a death wish in paste form. The girls learned not to scream when they peed. They learned to chew on cloth when the lesions burst. They learned to keep working because rent didn't care that your insides were burning. In one account, a girl named Mira stuffed parchment paper into herself, believing it would draw the poison out. She read it somewhere. Or maybe a customer told her. Or maybe she was just desperate. She lay on a straw mattress, shaking, whispering to the Virgin Mary through clenched teeth. She was 16. Even fellow townsfolk kept their distance. Disease wasn't seen as misfortune. It was punishment. Divine. Deserved. If a prostitute got sick, she had summoned it. People crossed the street. Some threw rotten bread. One town exiled its entire brothel after 3 women developed sores with the smell of sulfur. But isolation didn't kill them first. It was shame. No one visited. No one brought soup. No one tucked them in. They died with no hands holding theirs. Not because no one was there, but because no one dared to care. And yet, they kept living, somehow. They shared rags soaked in salt water, passed herbs smuggled from the back of apothecaries, and whispered old tricks passed down like holy rites. Boil nettles. Rub garlic. Don't let him see the scabs. It wasn't healing. It was damage control. It was hope with a limp. One old madam, her nose eaten away from years of untreated disease, once said, "You don't survive by being clean. You survive by not dying before rent day." And she was right, because pain wasn't private in the brothel. It was communal. They shared baths, beds, and burdens. The sick helped the sicker. The dying told jokes. One girl kept a pet rat to make herself laugh at night. They made tragedy tolerable, barely. But the world outside didn't know that. Or maybe it didn't care. To the world, they were walking infections, carriers of hell. To each other, they were still human, barely held together, but human nonetheless. And in that broken space, they kept going. Love a luxury we couldn't afford. We weren't allowed to dream of love. We sold the illusion, not the reality. Most nights, she said, "I love you" more times than she could count. None of them were true. And worse, she feared none of them ever would be. For women in the oldest profession, love was a distant country, a place others were allowed to visit, but one they had no passport to. From the moment she sold her body, she was told, "You are used. You are stained. You don't get romance. You get rent." Some girls tried. Quiet, secret love like lighting a candle in a storm. There was Rosa, who fell for a stable boy. They shared bread behind the horse stalls and dreamed of running away. But when his family found out, they beat him and locked him inside. Rosa was called a temptress, a witch, a disease in a skirt. He never came back. Others learned not to try. They'd seen it too often, men who whispered promises until morning only to disappear by dusk. Men who wanted the thrill of loving a bad girl, but not the shame of marrying one. One girl said, "He kissed my scars like they were sacred. But when his brother saw me, he called me rot." But sometimes, rarely, someone meant it. There was an old story passed around the brothels. A soldier once loved a girl who'd waited for him through the war. He returned limping but alive, carrying a ring he'd kept in his boot. He came to marry her, but the town wouldn't allow it. "She is a whore," they shouted. "She defiles the name of wife." They dragged him away. She never saw him again. The ring sat in a drawer for 20 years beside a yellowing letter that began, "I loved you before the blood, and I love you after it." No one knows if it was true, but the girls believed it. They needed to. Because in a life where you faked pleasure, feigned affection, and swallowed heartbreak like medicine, the idea of someone truly choosing you, not for your body, not for your cost, but for your whole self, that was wealth beyond imagination. But most of them never found it. They watched from behind windows as other women walked to church arm in arm with their husbands. They dressed in old wedding veils just to feel what it might be like. Some even made up imaginary lovers, crafting whole lives in their heads, where someone waited for them after work, with tea, not coin. They laughed about it, pretended they didn't care. But on quiet nights, when the last drunk client had left and the candles burned low, they whispered dreams into the dark. Not for riches, not for fame, just to be touched without a price. Aging the body fades, but the stigma doesn't. Beauty is a currency that expires fast. The trouble, the debts never do. Shitty Pete. Once the curves softened and the sparkle dulled, the clients started to vanish like ghosts at dawn. A girl who was once the star of the night found herself the last on the block. Her name whispered like a bad rumor rather than a desirable secret. But there was no retirement plan, no pension fund, no cozy little house to fade away in. Just cold streets, cruel eyes, and the echo of memories no one wanted to hear. Some begged for coins by the market stalls, their hands shaking as they held out empty palms. Others ended up locked away in jails or workhouses, branded as wandering women, the societal equivalent of unwanted trash. Rare were the ones who made it past 40 without a chronic cough scars from infections or worse disabilities born from years of abuse and neglect. The body worn like an old coat was the visible reminder of a hard life, and the stigma that was tattooed deeper than any mark. There's a story, bitter and funny, if you squint hard enough, about a woman who quit the trade after decades. She tried to get work washing clothes for a merchant's family. Sure, they said, "We'll hire you if your hands don't make our linens dirtier than they were." She begged, "My hands might be worn, but they know work." The answer was a cold, sharp no, because her past wasn't something you washed off. It clung like mud under fingernails. She wasn't just rejected for her looks or age. She was rejected because society couldn't shake the idea that once a whore, always a whore. The paradox was cruel. When working, she was scorned. When not working, she was useless. And so the years dragged on, the contradictions piling like the layers of grime on an old tavern floor. Some women banded together in grim solidarity, sharing what little warmth and food they could muster. Others found bitter solace in drink or whispered stories of better days. The world was a cold place for those whose bodies no longer commanded desire, but whose names still carried shame. And yet, through all the scorn and hardship, they survived. Not because anyone cared, but because giving up wasn't an option. As one old woman put it, "I may not be pretty, I may not be wanted, but I'm still here, and that's more than most." Aging in this line of work was a twisted kind of curse. The fading body made you invisible to those who once sought you, but the marks on your reputation made you visible to all the wrong eyes. It was a life with no win, just endless compromises. Unnamed mirrors stories of 3 women. In every brothel, behind every candlelit room and stained mattress, there are women whose stories never made it to scrolls or scripture. They were not saints. They were not queens. But if you listen closely, they echo louder than all the nobles combined. Here are 3 such echoes. Marla, the mother of 7, father of none. No one knew where Marla came from. She just appeared one day in the Red District, already weary in the eyes, but sharp-tongued enough to keep drunks in check. Her belly swelled every couple of years. No one asked who the father was. Neither did she. I didn't choose to be a mother. I just refused to stop being one, she once told a younger girl, while spoon-feeding a feverish toddler with the same hand she used to pull in customers hours before. Marla raised 7 children. Not one of them shared a father, but all shared her last crust of bread. She taught them how to read using old prayer scraps and drew maps in the dirt to show them the world outside their alley. At night, she'd hum lullabies while dabbing ointment on cracked nipples and bruised thighs. One of her sons, Elijah, grew up to become a monk. He never denied who she was. When asked what his mother did for a living, he simply answered, "She did what she had to, so I could choose something else." When Marla died, they buried her in unconsecrated ground. Elijah placed a carved wooden rose on her grave with a single word: sanctified. Cecilia, the girl who painted ghosts. Cecilia had once dreamed of painting angels. At 14, she was apprenticed to a painter who promised to teach her light and shadow. What he taught instead was betrayal. When he violated her, her family said she had invited sin and threw her out like a broken chalice. She arrived at the brothel with nothing but a charcoal stub and a folded piece of canvas. "I don't want to forget faces," she said, "even the cruel ones, especially the kind ones." Cecilia painted between clients, not landscapes or saints, but the faces of men she saw each night: the butcher who kissed her forehead after, the grieving father who paid just to talk, the soldier who cried in her lap. Each portrait was small, raw, human. Sometimes she captured just eyes, sometimes only hands. "I paint so they won't vanish, because if they vanish, maybe I do too." Years later, one of her paintings, a smudged profile titled "Man with No Name," was discovered in a ruined abbey and later hung in a museum. The artist's signature read only, "See the Unremembered." No one ever connected it to the whore in the alley, but she would have smiled at that. Brunhilde, the last flower of the Red Street. Brunhilde was older than sin and twice as sarcastic. Known as Hilda the Hammer, she outlived every brothel in her district and most of the clients, too. When she retired by her own decision, she moved into a crumbling shack and started planting flowers. "I've touched more penises than a midwife," she joked. "Now it's time I touched some dirt." Her front yard became a strange, whimsical memorial. Each flower bed was labeled not with Latin names, but with old nicknames of her customers. There was the drunken Duke lavender, the silent blacksmith carnations, the priest who wept white lilies, and even Coffee Pete, a stubborn daisy that never bloomed right. Every man I touched left something behind. Some left shame, some left coins, some left their goddamn scent. I just chose to turn all that into blossoms. No one visited her. Not until the day she died, curled up in her garden chair, hat slumped over her eyes. The town cleric refused to give her a sermon. She lived in sin, he declared. But someone left a letter on her doorstep. Unnamed, handwritten in trembling script. "You saved me the night I almost threw myself into the river. You said nothing, just hugged me. It was enough. I never came back, but I never forgot you." Underneath the letter sat a tin of cookies and a cat purring on her lap. Epilogue: Mirrors without names. These three women were never canonized, painted in stained glass, or recorded in royal scrolls. They lived in back alleys and behind red curtains, holding the burdens of men's lust and society's hypocrisy. But they were not weak. They were not only whores. They were mothers, artists, and gardeners of grief. Each chose survival in a world that gave them no choices. If society looked at them and saw only shame that says more about the mirror than the reflection, when we dare to look straight. There is a certain power in choosing to see, truly see, what we have long been trained to ignore. To look into the eyes of those whom history has labeled with shame and realize the shame was never theirs to carry. Society has always been swift with judgment and slow with empathy. Prostitutes were, and in many ways still are, convenient scapegoats for a world uncomfortable with its own contradictions, used in the shadows, condemned in the light, silenced by both morality and law, yet expected to keep existing quietly, invisibly, and preferably without complaint. But judgment does not erase truth, and stigma has never succeeded in killing survival. These women, battered by time, disease, and rejection, continued to endure. Not for glory, not for applause, simply for the right to exist in a world that wrote them off. They stitched broken days into blankets of resilience. They raised children while being disowned by families. They built community in brothels where no one else would offer kindness. They grew gardens on sidewalks cracked by cruelty. They held space for joy, even when the world insisted they deserved none. And perhaps more importantly, they bore witness to hypocrisy without ever having the luxury to name it out loud. It is easy to call them fallen, much harder to call them fighters. Because what is strength if not waking up each day in a world that wants you gone and choosing to live anyway? To look away is to remain complicit, but to look straight at them, at their stories, their wounds, their quiet dignity, is to admit that our society has never truly protected the vulnerable. It has punished them for needing protection in the first place. We do not tell these stories to sanctify. We tell them because they happened, because they are still happening, and because no amount of decorum or religion can justify erasing someone's humanity. So if one day we are asked to sculpt a monument to courage, let us think carefully. Do not carve a sword-wielding knight on a stallion. Carve instead a tired woman sitting on the edge of a bed, her feet blistered from standing too long. Her eyes open but heavy, her body worn but still there. Let the plaque read, "She did not fight to win. She fought to stay." And that too is courage. Sex never dies. It just changes. Rolls. Desire is a river that never dries. If you think prostitution is gone, just open Instagram at 2 a.m. Once upon a time, medieval prostitutes were dragged through the mud, cursed for selling their bodies. Fast forward to now, modern-day women showing cleavage in a live stream are still accused of the same crime, only with better lighting and PayPal links. We love to believe we've outgrown immorality, that we are now an enlightened, progressive society. But beneath all the digital gloss, the truth is embarrassingly unchanged. The demand for sex never disappeared. We just outsourced it to OnlyFans, SugarDaddy.com, and those anonymous midnight Venmo transfers labeled tutoring. Desire has never died. It simply rewrote the script. From candlelit brothels to cam sites, from whispers in alleyways to viral DMs, sex work has always found a stage. And society, still the same conflicted audience, part thrilled, part ashamed, all watching. In this chapter, we're not just here to talk about sex. We're here to talk about how we treat people who carry the weight of everyone else's hidden urges. We'll travel from the stained stones of medieval alleys to today's glowing screens and ask, Why do we still hate the women who offer what the world clearly wants? Why do we shame the mirror instead of questioning what it reflects? And most importantly, what happens when we stop judging and start listening? Because maybe, just maybe, sex work was never the shameful act. Maybe the real shame is how we keep pretending we're not part of it. New shadows of an old profession. Sex work didn't disappear. It evolved, logged in, and got better Wi-Fi. In the Middle Ages, a sex worker stood on a street corner. Today, she might be reclining in front of a ring light, whispering into a microphone, while her viewers flood the chat with emojis and cash. But behind the filters and fake names, the equation is hauntingly familiar. Someone gives intimacy, someone else pays for it, and both pretend it's just entertainment. The platforms changed, not the power dynamics. Where once there were brothels, now there are cam rooms. Where there were alleyways now, there are encrypted chat apps. The medieval courtesan wore bells to be publicly shamed. The modern OnlyFans girl gets doxxed online for daring to monetize desire. Today's sex workers wear many digital masks. The 18-plus live streamer with tiered subscription perks. The sugar baby with a mentor. The finance-savvy good girl who flirts with cryptocurrency and compliance in equal measure. They aren't prostitutes in the traditional sense, but let's not kid ourselves. The core transaction hasn't changed. What's being sold isn't just sex, or even the idea of sex. It's attention, affection, the illusion of being seen, a momentary cure for loneliness. And society still performing the same tired theater? We follow, we subscribe, we message in the dead of night. Then we judge, we screenshot. We post things like, what happened to modesty these days? It's the old hypocrisy with new usernames. A medieval man might sneak into the brothel and later throw stones at the window. A modern one might spend $200 in private chat and then call the woman a whore on Reddit. So what has changed? Not much, except now we can lock our shame behind passwords and private servers. We can pretend we're not involved until we are. Because sex never really leaves the room. It just gets better lighting and searchable hashtags. There's one more twist to today's story. Consent is clearer and agency is louder. Many modern sex workers are not victims but strategists, entrepreneurs, survivors who understand their worth in a world that still refuses to name it. But even with choice, power is complicated. Because when you make a living feeding someone else's fantasy, you risk forgetting what yours ever was. The truth, we're not ashamed of them. We're ashamed of ourselves. No one hates sex workers more than those who can't face their own desires. It's an uncomfortable truth, but let's rip off the mask. Society's disgust is not about morality. It's about mirrors. The kind that don't distort, but reflect. A sex worker does not invent desire. She responds to it. She doesn't force anyone to look, yet they do. And what they see isn't just her body. It's their own hunger, the longing they'd rather deny, or the fantasy they wish they were brave enough to live. That's why judgment comes so easily. Not because she is immoral, but because she is visible. Because she stands in a spotlight most people are too scared to even admit exists. She names what others bury. So the world lashes out. It's easier to call her shameful than to ask, why do I care so much? It's safer to ridicule her work than to question our own relationship with sex, power, or loneliness. In that sense, the sex worker becomes society's scapegoat, punished not for what she does, but for what she reveals. She becomes a mirror society tries to smash, hoping the shards won't reflect anything too familiar. But some refuse to break. Some, like Lena, a former sex worker from Eastern Europe, chose to step forward rather than vanish. After years in the underground scene, she now runs workshops on sexual health and boundaries for teenagers. Her sessions are not about shame. They're about clarity, not don't do it. But here's how to stay safe, stay human, stay true to yourself. Lena doesn't preach. She listens. She teaches consent like it's a language. She talks about trauma, healing, pleasure, and dignity, not as theory, but as someone who's lived all of it. I used to sell comfort to men, she says. Now I teach girls how not to sell themselves short. Her story isn't unique, but it's rarely told. Because it's easier to talk about sex workers as cautionary tales than as courageous humans who reclaim agency and create change. But we must. Because the shame we throw on them, it's just misplaced fear. What if instead of judging the mirror, we asked what it's showing us? Good night, my wandering soul. You've carried so many thoughts today. Some light like feathers, others heavy like stones. But the day is over now, and you have done more than enough. Let the weight of worries slip from your shoulders. Let the questions pause. They will wait until morning. Right now, you don't need answers. You only need rest. Close your eyes. The world is not asking anything of you in this moment. No deadlines, no expectations, no performances. Just you, your breath, and the slow rhythm of the night wrapping around you like a blanket. You are safe. Out there beyond the window, the moon is watching over you like an old friend. She doesn't judge you. She only glows quietly. And the stars. They blink not because they are far away, but because they too are trying to stay awake with you. Even the sky wants you to rest gently. Remember, not all healing happens in daylight. Some of the most sacred repairs happen in silence, when the body exhales, when the heart unknots itself slowly in sleep. Tonight, give yourself permission to not be strong, to not be productive, to not be perfect. Be soft. Be tired. Be exactly as you are. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are a story still unfolding, and rest is part of the plot. And if a stray tear visits your cheek, let it. Tears are not weakness. They are a kind of cleansing, like rain washing the leaves after a long dry season. So breathe in and breathe out. Let go. Let go. Tomorrow can carry its own weight. Tonight belongs to your peace, and as your mind begins to drift, maybe you'll wander into a dream where you're walking barefoot on soft moss, or lying in a boat on a quiet lake, the sky endless above you. Maybe you'll hear laughter from a memory, or a song only you remember. Whatever finds you in your sleep, let it be kind. Let it be gentle. You deserve that. Let your inner child come home for the night. The part of you that still believes in magic, that still hopes even when it's tired. Let it curl up inside your chest, like a kitten finding warmth. There is no shame in needing rest, no failure in slowing down. Even the stars take turns shining. Even the ocean sleeps between waves. You are not meant to carry everything alone. The world is heavy, yes, but so are seeds, and they hold entire forests inside. Good night, sleep deep, dream weird. We'll be moaning again tomorrow. Tonight, rest like you are something worth protecting. Because you are. So hush now. Let the day close its eyes with you. Let your heartbeat fall into rhythm with the silence. Let your body remember, this is home, this moment, this breath. Good night, sleep deep, and may the softness you give yourself tonight grow into strength for the morning. You are already healing.